I've played more than a dozen games of Warcry, and I'm sad to say it's just not for me, and here's my brutally honest opinion why. Hello everyone, and welcome to the BattleCast. Today's video is going to be a little more casual, a little bit more of an opinion piece, but I've played over a dozen games of Warcry now using competitive and casual setups, and it's just not clicking, sadly. So I thought I'd give you my opinion why this game, in my opinion, is not what I'm looking for, maybe not what you're looking for, I don't know. So this is my opinion, and obviously, take it with a grain of salt. It's okay if you like Warcry, but I've learned that I'm not just going to pursue something in the hope that, my YouTube channel gets more popular. I mean, if I'm not enjoying a game, I'm not going to play it, and at the current state it is, Warcry doesn't appear to be a game that I could play on this channel. So I'm going to start with the things that I like about Warcry, and there are a couple. So I think that the core set, the value of the core set is amazing. I think that the terrain in the core set is awesome. You can really use that terrain for so many things, and so I actually really enjoyed the terrain that came with Warcry. I think that the initiative mechanic from Warcry is quite clever. I think that Games Workshop should take this idea that they've come up with, this whole rolling and based on your singles and your doubles, you get to go first or get abilities. I think that they should run with that. That can definitely be used in another game or whatever. I think it's very clever. So that was a plus. And lastly, I think the models are really good. Warcry has some amazing models with the splintered fang and the Corvus Cabal, and the faceless, I don't know, the guys who wear their face on the belt. Very good models. So now onto the bad stuff for Warcry. And again, this is my opinion, and it's coming from a competitive gamer perspective. And unfortunately, I do have a few things to say. So the thing that kind of irks me about Warcry is that it's a movement game that doesn't particularly reward careful movement. And at the same time, how could it? Because the terrain is 3D and it's very finicky. It often requires you reaching your fat fingers into the fray of models sandwiched between other buildings or under buildings. And so, how can they be strict on movement? But it plays such an important part of the game. Movement is more important than combat in Warcry, and yet its setting is almost directly combating itself. Now, granted, some of the other terrain packs, like the graveyard one or the temple ruins, they're a little more open, so it's a little better. But the one that comes in the core set, it's a bit tricky. There are also few auras. You don't get crowd out bonuses if you have multiple units attacking one unit. And cover in Warcry works in a very strange way, where you can shoot someone who's against a wall and they can get cover, which is kind of odd, when maybe in reality they might be able to, dodge to the side or something. So it's kind of weird that way. And lastly, in many games, so you can't move through people in Warcry, which is fine, but in many games, if at any point your movement brings you alongside a unit in Warcry, in other games, you kind of have to stop. You're engaged, or they get a parting blow on you if you go away. Well, in Warcry, as long as you end your movement not within an inch of an enemy model, that's fine. So you can actually move through or around enemy units without being stopped by them. And so the only way a unit in Warcry actually impedes you is if they make you use 2 moves to get past them. I guess that's a little bit of a slowdown. Or they're physically blocking a doorway. You can't get your base through. And those scenarios are somewhat few and far between, as you can kind of climb up and over stuff. So many of the scenarios that come up in Warcry, and this is less true, well, I don't know, it's kind of equally true for the competitive scenarios as well, is it seems to reward warbands with high movement and many activations. The MSU tactic is used in other games sort of this nature, and it's quite strong, and I think it's strong in Warcry as well. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, don't some warbands in Warcry excel at killing versus movement, shenanigans, or multiple units? And the answer is yes, you're right, they do. The Iron Golems are a perfect example. They, on average, deal a bit more damage than other warbands, and they also are harder to kill than other warbands. But the thing about Warcry, and this is kind of my next point, is the combat is so weird. The combination of damage and defensive stats is a step away from what Games Workshop has traditionally done, that is, roll to hit, roll to wound, roll to defend. Instead, what they've done is they've kind of hybridized everything together. So you're like, your defense is 5, which is more than my attack. So now I need to hit you on a 5 and a 6, and if I roll them, you're taking the damage. There's no response. So by taking away defensive rolls, Games Workshop is kind of disincentivizing bringing strong fighters into Warcry, and I'll explain why. So let's take a look at the Iron Golems, and their Legionnaires with shields have a whopping defense of 5, and that's actually quite impressive. That's definitely above average, and based on your attack, you're probably going to hit them on a 5 or a 6. What's sort of frustrating about this mechanic is your hands are off the table as a defender. The only thing you did to prepare for this attack is having the defense of 5, which is more than their attack. So now you just kind of sit and watch as things happen, especially because there's no crowd out bonuses, there's no support bonuses. Yeah. So with a defense of 5, this means that most people are hitting you on a 5 or a 6, and the vast majority of models in Warcry do 1 to 2 damage per hit, many doing 1. But the crit damage, and this is the kicker, increases damage by 200 to 400%. I mean, more than the regular hit. And this is kind of where the problem for me in Warcry lies primarily. Once you establish that you need a 5 or a 6 to hit, you're really just rolling for criticals. If rolling a 5 does 1 damage, and rolling a critical does 4 damage, which it does in the case of like the Goblin Spearmen, you're really just rolling for crits with your guys, so you might as well bring as many of them as you can and roll as many dice as possible, because for every 1 crit you get, that's the same as rolling 4 5s. And it just kind of feels wrong to me. The other thing is that this brutal escalation in damage on criticals really takes away from the point of being defensive. I mean, if you have an attack of, a strength value of 1, and I have a defense value of 11 billion. If you roll criticals, you're still hitting me because you still hit on a 5 or 6, and you're going to hit me for 400% damage of your regular hit. So I just don't like that there's, at least with a defensive roll, if you're saving on 2 ups, like, there you go. That's the shutdown feature, but instead, it's just a game of criticals. As a result, the damage in this game can be outrageously swingy. And the worst part as a defender is there's just nothing you can do about it. You just sit there. You might as well go to the bathroom and come back when your turn's done and find out what happened. In many of my games, you see turns where you're doing 2 damage, 1 damage, 2 damage, and then 20. At least in games like Warhammer Underworlds or even 40k or Age of Sigmar, you can always roll your defense dice and possibly defend yourself. There's incentive for building a tanky warband or putting on auras and buffs that give you more defense. The last thing about Warcry I am not enjoying is the lack of meaningful decisions, and this starts right with the setup. Now in casual play, surprisingly, there's more meaningful decisions in regards to setup because one side could be skewed, and you might want to spend that wild dice to increase your initiative so you can choose the side of the board that you're on because it is skewed. But in competitive play, everything is symmetrical. And I get why, obviously, because, having one side being outrageously skewed does not make for fun gameplay experiences. But at the same time, this has got to be one of the first games I've ever played where setup almost means nothing. And I understand that going first, could be good, but on turn 1, I don't know, whatever. I think that if there were meaningful decisions to deployment, it would fit really well with Warcry because the way of gaining initiative is really clever. I love that dice rolling mechanic and wild dice. I think it's really cool. In the later rounds, it does sort of matter. Maybe you've got somebody who's in trouble and, if you get the initiative, you can use them before they die or something. But yeah. The other thing about the decisions is there really aren't that many decisions to make at all. The actions you can take with your fighter are move, attack, and wait. That's it. There's some variations on movement. But even if you roll the maximum amount of ability dice, that is 3 doubles, that means only for 3 of your fighters are you making like an extra decision where you might do something a little cooler. And again, that just seems like so little. Outside of these special abilities, you are literally just moving, attacking, or waiting. And because many games in Warcry are only 3 rounds long, this is what a battle can look like. In the first round, you move. In the second round, you move, attack. And in the third round, you attack. And that's if the objective is, to kill stuff. Now, conversely, if the objective is, say, hold an objective or hold objectives, well, you could literally spend the whole game moving with everybody. And because in Warcry there are so few ways to manipulate your opponent, there's no drive back, there's no pushing, there's a couple abilities that allow you to manipulate your own fighters, and there's a couple abilities that can disable enemy fighters, but like if they're standing on an objective, they're on the objective. And so the only way to take it is to contest. And given the way damage works in this game, I mean, unless you're rolling many 6s, you're probably not going to kill them. So what ends up happening is you just end up dogpiling all your models onto objectives, and it's like, well, who has the most people? You've got 6, I've got 7, I win. I don't know. Call me crazy, but it's just not that fun. Now, admittedly, I haven't played this game in like a tournament or anything like that, and it's still in its infancy, so things could change. However, I know many of us here know that this game does lack meaningful decisions. I mean, there's no way about it. And there's decreased interaction between players as you just watch as your opponent, does something, and the preparation you can do to prepare for them is so limited. The high rolling of dice feels brutal, even in contrast to Warhammer Underworlds. And I just think all these things are stacking it up to be certainly not a competitive game in my mind. Amazingly, and I will thank Warcry for this, it has reaffirmed my love for Warhammer Underworlds. I mean, Warhammer Underworlds is a great game, and one of Games Workshop's best. And so after playing Warcry many times, I think, wow, Warhammer Underworlds looks really good. So I think that the game is fine. And I think that if you like Warcry, that's great. And I'm still going to play Warcry, but few and far between. I think I'd almost rather play anything else. And I don't think it's going to be on this channel as much as I had initially hoped. Sadly, I am disappointed by that. So for those of you who are really wanting to see Warcry here, we might have a little. But as I say, I mean, gosh, I would way rather play some Warhammer Underworld. So let me know what you think about these thoughts. Have you had this experience, or maybe a completely different experience? I'm always willing to have my mind changed, but I know in my heart that Warcry right now is not the game for me. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider supporting the channel by liking this video or subscribing to the channel, and especially hitting that bell icon. Feel free to leave comments in the comments section below. I love talking with you guys. Until next video, I'll see you then. Thanks.